All right, today we're going to talk about solving equations. So here's your date and here's your new lesson. It's actually two lessons put together. You'll see why. These are just going to be your one-step equations. You've been doing these for a few years, so we can put these two lessons together. All right, when you are solving an equation, first let's look at some that involve addition and subtraction. So just to kind of go over how equations are solved again, you go to where your variable is. So here's the x. We are adding a 5 to it, and it's equal to 13. So to solve the equation, we need to think, what is the opposite of adding 5? Addition and subtraction are opposite of each other, so when you see an add 5, you want to subtract 5. The reason why it's okay to do that is a 5 minus a 5, they actually cancel each other out and they equal 0. So these cancel equaling 0, and then you can see that leaves us with just the x, which is what we're trying to solve for. We're trying to get that alone. But the thing with an equation, if I'm going to subtract 5 on one side, I have to subtract 5 on the other side. So this leaves me with, I have x on the left side. I just bring down my equal sign, and then 13 minus 5 is 8. So we have x equals 8. Now I know you guys have been doing these for a few years, but it's still just good to kind of go through and think about the process again. All right, next example, x, we are subtracting 2/3. So even though it's a fraction, don't worry about that. Just say, well, what's the opposite of subtracting 2/3? And that's going to be adding 2/3. So I'm going to add 2/3 to both sides. Negative 2/3 plus 2/3 equals 0, so that cancels. So what we have to do is this math over here on the right. I have to know what 4 plus 2/3 is. Anytime you're dealing with fractions, let's make both numbers fractions. I can make the 4 a fraction by saying it's equal to a 4 over 1. And then we need a common denominator because we're adding fractions. So I have a 1 and a 3. Let's go ahead and multiply this fraction top and bottom by 3. So that gives us 12 over 3 plus 2 over 3. Now you can see we have that common denominator. So now we can go ahead and add those two fractions together. The common denominator stays the same, and then 12 plus 3 is 14. So x is equal to a 14 over 3. Now, this is an improper fraction. You're going to notice in algebra we really try to stay away from mixed numbers. We like mixed numbers if we have to plot points, so we can see where it is on a number line or on a graph. But if it's just a fraction as your answer, make sure it's reduced. 14 and 3 cannot be divided by the same number, so we're going to leave that as an answer, and we are okay with the fact that it's an improper fraction. So solving equations with addition and subtraction, you just do the opposite operation to get the number alone. All right, so that brings us to solving equations with multiplication and division. So what you do is you focus on where the variable is. We have 4 times m is equal to 44, so that is multiplication right there. The opposite of multiplying is dividing, so we can go ahead and divide both sides by 4. Now the reason why it works out to divide, if I were to take 4 and divide it by itself, 4 divided by 4 actually equals 1, and 1 times m is just m. So we get m equals, and that's why we get to cross those off a lot, because they actually divide each other out. They just equal a 1. And then we say 44 divided by 4 on the right side is 11. All right, next example, we have x divided by 3 equals 5. So the opposite of that divided by 3 is multiply by 3. So again, we are dividing by 3. Opposite is multiply by 3. When I multiply by 3, I like to write it as a 3 over 1. The only reason I do that is so I can see that, yeah, the 3 is up here across from the x, the 1 is down here across from the 3. And what that allows you to do is do this cross reducing, and they just cancel each other right out. We don't want to forget to go ahead and multiply the right side by 3 also, leaving us with x equals 5 times 3 is 15. Alright, last example, we have 2/3 x equals 4. This is multiplication right here. So the opposite of multiplying by 2/3 is dividing by 2/3. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2/3. 2/3 divided by 2/3 is 1, so we can cross those off. And now we just have to do this math right here. Fractions, I think it's helpful to write side by side. The top number you have to write first, so 4 divided by 2/3. Again, let's make that 4 a fraction, 4 over 1. And then we ask ourselves, okay, how do we divide fractions again? Do I need a common denominator? Should I cross reduce? Do I flip and multiply? So hopefully you're saying, yeah, flip and multiply. So the first one stays the same. Change this to multiplication and we actually flip that fraction. Instead of 2 over 3, we will have 3 over 2. Feel free to do any cross reducing. This 4 and this 2 can both be divided by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Multiply the numbers you have left. 2 times 3 is 6. 1 times 1 is 1. So x equals 6 over 1, which is the same thing as a 6. That is a 6. Okay. And that is using multiplication division to solve an equation.